Hello, everyone. So let's talk a bit about loops. So what happens in Java in terms of loops is somewhat similar to what happens in C++. So you can have three types of loops. In fact, four types of loops. The first one is a while loop. You say, for example, while some condition is true, execute some block of statements, and keep doing that until that condition isn't true. In terms of do while loop, what we have, once again, so do something encapsulated within your block of statements until some condition is true. And once again, this actually loop runs at least once, and it will keep running unless this condition isn't true. In terms of for loops, what we can have is basically for some condition initialized, and then until some condition is true, and then keep incrementing after, or do something after each iteration, and then continue doing this until this condition isn't true. So these are the three loops that we have in Java. Once again, somewhat similar to what we have in C++. There are also for each loops, which we are going to study later, maybe, but I think C++, right? These days they also have for each loops for iterating a collection. In any case, let's talk about variables. So what happens in Java is that every variable is a reference. What I mean by that is, let's say that you create an array of integers. You call that array A, and then you do something like some other array is equal to that previous array. Now what happens is that this actually this here, what we have is basically these three numbers existing somewhere in heap in memory, and that memory is being referred by both variables A and B. And A and B are aliases, and both of those aliases are pointing to the same block of memory in some sense. And A, if you want to see what is, let's say, the identity of a, in C++ we can see memory location of anything. Basically, you'll say that this is an integer pointer, and you'll actually see the hexadecimal location where A is located, the start of A is located. But in Java we can do this. So but what we can do is basically we can print out the so-called hash code, which is basically the identity of each variable. So if you print out hash codes of A and B, you'll see that both of these lines will print the same integer. We actually have an integer which is the sort of ID of variable. Internally, what this means is that if both variables A and B are pointing to the same location, then if you change one variable, you will see that this change will be reflected in the other variable as well. Okay, so I'm just changing the first item of B, but that change will also be reflected in A. So both A and B are pointing to the same location in memory. In C++, if you allocate something in heap, for example, and then do this, for example, let's say that so array list, it's a basically alias of std vector in some sense. So you create an array of integers. We are going to see how this differs from this integer array. This is a reference integer data type versus this is small int int is a primitive data type in Java. But here we are going to create an array, integer array a managed array A, and just add some elements. And then if I say that okay, that variable A points to some new integer array, then Java automatically will do the cleanup. It will destroy the original contents of A, and now your A reference will point to some new integer array. Okay, this is not recommended in C++. In C++, you have to explicitly deallocate memory before doing this stuff. If you do something like this in C++, that is actually what creates a memory leakage. But in Java, you don't have to worry about that. Just to keep replacing, creating new arrays, and replacing old variables with new ones. Right. Further to that, let's see how we have talked about every variable is a reference, but this doesn't necessarily mean that once we have a function and where if we pass some argument, we have a pass by reference in C++. It doesn't happen here in Java. So in Java, everything is copied into the input arguments of the function using pass by value. Even if you pass an argument which is an instance of a class. So for example, you have a class dog, some attributes, some methods to that. One method basically sets the name of the dog, the other method prints, or let's say gets the name of the dog. We will come to this function, but within we have a class, and in that class what we are doing is basically creating a new dog instance, calling that instance as a dog, and then doing something like this. We are saying that, okay, create a second dog instance, and both of these dog instances, old dog and a dog, will point to the same object that exists in heap, which has a name of Max. If you see that both of these objects will have the same hash code. Now if I pass one dog instance to this function foo, what will happen is that imagine that a dog is an integer. It contains an integer ID, for example. Now that integer ID will be copied to this variable d. Now this variable d will once again, so now we have three instances, three references of same object: a dog, old dog, and then this d, which is pointing to the same dog. Okay, if you print, it will automatically call this getName method, which will print you this Max, the name of the dog. If you say inside this foo function that this variable d, this reference d, points to some new dog instance, obviously this is correct. It will print this Fifi, the new dog's name. But that reference d, it's since it was copied by reference, it will be destroyed once the scope gets out of this this function foo. Okay, now this reference being destroyed doesn't mean that the original Max object is destroyed from heap. What this simply means is that we have copied that reference to this local variable. This local variable is now destroyed. Once we come out of this foo function, you will see that in this line, a dog dot get name, these two objects exist within the scope of this main function, and so therefore it will automatically print Max. And if you do this double equal to comparison of two objects, what happens is that if you compare any two objects, it will actually check the hash code and whether and it will see that whether the hash code of a dog is equal to the hash code of old dog or not. Okay, in this case it is equal, because you see in these two lines it will print some unique integer. Okay, so if you pass anything to a function, that thing is basically copied to your local arguments of your function. Okay, right. So this was how parameters are passed within the function. Let's talk a bit about classes. So in classes, you can, in Java, we can have empty classes. For example, just declare a class, vehicle. If you do not provide any constructor, any sort of initializer of this class, Java will implicitly assumes one. Implicitly assume one. So what this means is that when you create some object instance, it will automatically create an empty. It will automatically call an empty constructor. If you do specify some default implementation of your constructor, obviously, that implementation will be called over here. So, after line 29, you will see that, once this object is created, you'll see that this line will be printed. Okay. So we are explicitly calling our default constructor over here. Here we haven't provided any implementation, but Java assumes one. Okay, so in the next video, we are going to see inheritance and how that works in conjunction with constructors.